Hi everyone, it's Heidi from Cameo. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give people just another minute to log on to the call. In the meanwhile, we have a nice intimate group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on you, and just if you could say your name and your organization, and if there's any other hello you would like to say to the group. And I think we're alphabetical order by first name. As you all probably know, my name is Heidi Pickman. I am the VP of Programs and Policy at Cameo. And I am going to call on my conspirator in crime, Melissa, to say hello.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm the SoCal Program Manager for Cameo.
Hi, Melissa. And Mark Quinn, who a lot of you probably know. Mark?
Hi, Heidi. This is Mark Quinn. Nice to be on.
Mark's, in case you don't know who Mark is our senior advisor, and he is the former SF district director for the SBA. So thanks, Mark, for joining us. And I'm gonna go down my list here, and I thought I had first one was Aaliyah, but we're gonna go a little out of order and say hi to Ron Fong.
Hi, it's Ron Fong, the Executive Director of the API Small Business Program.
In Los Angeles, yes.
In Los Angeles.
That was the other thing I forgot to tell you. Tell us where you're at. Aaliyah.
Hi, I'm actually a healthcare connection intern working with the East Oakland Black Cultural Zone Collaborative.
Oh, well, welcome, Aaliyah. This is
Thank you.
Some state and federal small business policy updates, so glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Barbara. Barbara is on her phone and muted. Barbara Mason is from TMCC here in San Francisco, and we will call on, introduce Liz Sullivan later, so in just a moment. First, next up is Carla.
Carla, this is Policy Advisor at the Unity Council in Oakland, California.
Hi, Carla, and welcome from Unity Council.
Thank
you. KDF, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, sure. Yeah, thank you. This is Katie Fitzsimmons. I'm on Wells Fargo's Community Relations team. Thanks for having me.
And Katie is a great partner for Cameo, so thanks for joining us. Lori. Nikki.
Hi, Nikki Parr, Associate Director at Women's Economic Ventures in Santa Barbara and overseeing our COVID response, still learning.
All right. And Javier?
Hello, I'm Javier Cibaja. I work for IOU America Community Corporation. We help small businesses for capital and technical assistance.
Welcome, Javier. And a 415 number that I'm not sure who it is, 415-541. All right, well, for those of you who are unmuted and unable to unmute yourself, Melissa, if you can do the next slide, please. I'll just give a quick little tutorial. Your mute button, I don't know where it is on the phone because I don't have the phone app, so if anybody wants to help me out here, but your mute button is if you take your cursor and bring it all the way down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see the microphone on the left, and the chat box will be like that little blurb, like a cartoon blurb that you're seeing. Just so everybody knows, we're recording this and we'll send everybody a copy of the slides as well as the audio for this meeting. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to talk about what's new. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not Ann Sullivan. We're going to have Liz Sullivan from Madison Services Group. Sorry about that, Liz. What's new for federal policy. Seems to have a lot going on at the federal level. And Mark Quinn from Cameo. And I'll give a little update from the state side. And then if anybody, there's open question, Q&A, if anybody wants to talk about anything. So Melissa, next slide. But before we go on, I want to just let everybody know, Cameo's having our State Advocacy Day on July 21st. We'll pop the link into chat where there's a lot going on. You know, there's some really good things for small business that we'll be advocating for and making sure that it ends up in the final budget. And I'll get to that at the end. So we hope that you join us. And we also have, so everybody knows, a Corona resource page. We keep the latest guidance from the SBA as well as resources and webinars that we are putting on. And if anybody has a resource that they'd like us to add to the page, we're happy to do so. So please visit that. And without further ado, I think I will introduce Liz Sullivan. She's with Madison Services Group. Has been a familiar face on these calls before. So thank you, Liz, for joining us. And she's going to give us what's happening in DC.
Much, Heidi. Thank you everyone for joining the call. I just wanted to do a quick overview on kind of what's happening and what the latest is. So policing reform obviously has been at the forefront of everything going on in Washington. You know, usually when there's one issue, it really takes over. And this very importantly has over the past, I want to say, few weeks. So here's kind of what's going on with that. There are two bills, one in the House, that's the Democrats bill, and one in the Senate, that's the Republican bill. The House bill just passed yesterday. That does things like making it easier to sue police for alleged rights violations, criminalize chokeholds and lynching, bar transfers of military equipment to police departments, and a bunch of other things. That passed the House. However, the Senate, which has a Republican-led bill, also was voted on this week but failed to get the 60 votes it needed because the Senate Democrats opposed it. Kind of the biggest contention between the two proposals is qualified immunity for police officers. So right now, as I'm sure you all have read in the news, both sides are kind of at a standstill of the House is saying, well, we passed our bill, you know what we want. And then the Republicans are saying, well, the Democrats didn't want to do it. So maybe we can't come to agreement. So it's not yet clear how differences will be reconciled, but you know, this is such an important issue. I can't imagine that some action won't happen. I think they just needed time to kind of make their political statements and then go to the negotiating table. Just some things going on regarding small business relief specifically. So everyone's just trying to figure out, everyone, both Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, what to do next. What do small businesses need next? There was kind of a discussion of a CARES 4 is what they're calling it, bill, but that got sidetracked with the policing legislation and is kind of coming back to light. One of the biggest things is what to do with the unused and unspent Paycheck Protection Program funds. There's still a fair amount of money left, and that money is almost done, let's say June 30th, right? And a couple of the proposals floating, one that's been really popular was introduced by the ranking member of the Senate Small Business Committee, Ben Cardin from Maryland. He's a Democrat, as well as Jeanne Shaheen, also a Democrat from New Hampshire. And to add more acronyms into your life, they're calling it the Prioritized Paycheck Protection Program, or P4 Act. So a House P4 companion bill was also introduced as well, but really front and center for this is how can we give relief to those largely left out of PPP loans, including minority-owned, women-owned, micro businesses, you know, people who are less banked, right? And so this consensus seems to be building, and Cameo has been a very loud voice on this to, you know, make sure that there's targeted relief. Any future PPP-like relief is directed towards these groups. And then also, you know, why can't we do some types of grants instead of forgivable loans? That would be easier. But one of the things the P4 Act does is it reserves $25 billion or 20% of PPP funds for employers with 10 or fewer employees, as well as small businesses in underserved and rural communities. It directs SBA to issue guidance to give priority to businesses with 10 employees or fewer in the processing and disbursement of P4 and PPP loans, and then also requires SBA to request demographic information of P4 and the PPP loan recipients. The Senate Small Business Committee, and I'm trying to remember when the last one of these that we had, if I talked about it there, but it's worth repeating. They had Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and the SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza to testify in front of them. And a lot of the things that, you know, are kind of floating around were really mentioned in that hearing. And you can go to sbc.senate.gov and just, it's worth checking out to see, you know, what the different members were saying, kind of ideas that were floated around, but that's really where all of this has stemmed from. So that's kind of what's going on there. A couple Republican senators, the chair of the Small Business Committee, Rubio, Ted Cruz, and then also Tim Scott from South Carolina, introduced a bill to expand PPP eligibility to chambers of commerce that are 501c6s, which is something that's been floated a bunch of times, and also destination marketing organizations. The hospitality industry is getting a lot of attention right now for how much help they need. So that's kind of not conflicting proposals, but just things being thrown out there. One other bill that I put on here was around employee testing. So Ted Cruz, again, the Republican from Texas, introduced a bill that would provide tax credits to businesses to offset the cost of testing COVID-19 in employees. That's something else, is kind of the, well, if you're going to return back to work, what do small businesses need to be able to be safe and successfully reopen? Which also brings me to the other bill on the slide that Cameo supported, which is a bipartisan bill called the Small Business PPE Tax Credit Act. And that provides a tax credit for the purchase of PPE to small businesses, 501c3s, sole proprietors, nonprofits, etc. So again, it's just from both sides, you know, what can we do to assist next? So Cameo has been very vocal in helping the Hill shape some of what they think should be next, but I'm really happy to join this today to hear from you all. Two other things, and then I'm going to stop talking, and because I want to hear from everyone. Treasury released a streamlined, easy forgiveness application form, and you have to meet one of the following criteria. You either have to be self-employed and have no employees, or you did not reduce the salaries or wages of your employees by more than 25% and did not reduce the number of hours of your employees, or you experienced reductions in business activity as a result of health directives related to COVID-19 and did not reduce the salaries or wages of your employees by more than 25%. So if it's one of those three things, you can do the streamlined application. That was something else that came out of the hearing, was members saying, hey, 11 pages and something that, you know, we need sophisticated accountants on isn't exactly helpful for small businesses like Treasury Department. We need you to get together. So that was a response there. And then also there was a back and forth around disclosing data on recipients of the P3 loans. And the Department of Treasury just announced that SBA will begin to disclose some of that data. And I can also put the link there if you're curious on exactly what that looks like. But that's kind of what's going on here. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Heidi.
Thanks. I know that I want to bring Mark Quinn into the conversation because I know he has some questions for you. We talked about today. So Mark, I'm going to actually ask you to step in and
Sure. Sure. Yeah, maybe a question to Elizabeth. Couple questions. We did see the streamlined forgiveness piece. But with 5,000 banks out there that have done at least some PPP loans and 4 million plus that have done smaller PPP loans, do you expect to see that further move to even make it even streamline to make it just forgiveness for the smaller loans, let's say under 150?
Treasury hasn't said or released anything about that. I know that that's something Senator Cardin cares about, the ranking member on the committee, but no, there's been no action around that yet. I think that the issues in the beginning around the large chains like Ruth's Chris, for example, getting some of the PPP money then made everyone step back and freak out and kind of be reticent to do any type of blanket forgiveness. But I have heard that been floated, but it's not in any official proposal yet.
Yeah, it's one of the things that will be an issue with that many people coming in looking for forgiveness, and even with the Streamlined piece. I think that for the Cameo organizations, their businesses that they have worked with on PPP, I think even that seems, I've helped somebody on those, and it's still fairly complicated for people to do it. Mm-hmm. And from SBA's side, when the back and forth for literally millions of requests for forgiveness, the next issue that's going to come up is going to be all of the gigantic number of questions and concerns about how the forgiveness piece will work. We're coming to the point, of course, this next week is the end of the PPP period. So people will be quickly starting to come back in looking for the forgiveness side. And when they do, I think that will be a time when the next round of complaints about there's so many complex situations coming up. So I think from the folks that we've seen, small business folks we've seen, I think that they have lots and lots of questions. And I think that from the lender side, there are going to be a lot of issues that will come up that people will say, this is still, we want to see a blanket forgiveness, at least if a blanket forgiveness is given below some threshold, 150 or something like that.
I think that's great, and definitely something that we can talk about tackling and suggesting and putting something together. That you completely agree.
Yeah, and the disclosure information that they've offered really only amounts to for loans over 150. And so it would be for those loans that the disclosure of who the borrowers were is only a small percentage, actually. While it's a large share of dollars, it's only about 15% of the actual number of borrowers. So if the forgiveness below 150 were to happen, it would be a lot easier for people to deal with. And then the disclosure would be for those that are bigger loans. I guess another question I have to you is, what do you see on the economic injury side of the funding? The most recent numbers still are not as big as what we have seen, and they reopened the window for economic injury, which had been closed for a month or so. Any sense that some of the PPP, if you will, unused money would be used for economic injury?
Not to keep mentioning Senator Cardin, but he's pretty vocal on things that he really cares about, especially his staff. And EIDL is his baby. That was his baby in CARES Act. That's the reason he wanted to get the SBA administrator in front of the committee, was to pressure them and say, what is going on with this? And in fact, he said, why didn't you just come back to us if you didn't have the money and just ask for more money? Like, we did that with PPP. Why don't you do that with EIDL? So I know they opened the floodgates, and the administrator said that they would have everyone in the portal, but that doesn't mean processed. So I can definitely see that some of that unused P3 money to be pushed into EIDL, just because that is really, I would say, the number one thing that he cares about. And again, really was his baby. And also, the $10,000, a lot of businesses couldn't get those $10,000 advances, and those make a huge difference, right? And that can be part of the, give grants, not loans. And so I mean, from everything I know and we know, I would say, yes, I can see some of that money or just other money being appropriated towards that program.
Yeah, Liz, just one comment on that is, if it goes that way, I think we would all advocate. I think it went from 10,000 to 1,000 per employee,
Right.
to 10,000, and really the 1,000 a month doesn't do anyone any
Right.
good. So
right. Well, and actually that point was made in the hearing, which was, this was not the intent of Congress. Like, what are you all doing? This is not what we wanted. This is peanuts. And the administrator's explanation was, well, we thought based on the amount of applications we had, if we divvied up the money we had, that could get money to everyone, and which is why then the senator came back and said, like, well, just ask us for more money. Like, we're spending trillions. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's a pretty widely accepted sentiment is, you know, that 1,000 per employee just, it's not enough.
Yeah. And I have the numbers I'll do after I'll just show everybody after we're done chatting. Mark, did you have other questions?
No, I'll chime in later though. That's fine.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question for Liz on what we saw before, or any of the issues that she discussed, and anything you want to ask? Anything you see from your members about these programs, working, not working, or what you'd like to see changed? You can go ahead and unmute yourself, but you don't need me to unmute you, or if you feel better commenting into chat, that's fine too.
Yes, please. That's really what, I mean, we want, and the members want, really what's working, what's not, new ideas as well.
Yeah. I mean, I do know the grant issue is taking place, and I've even heard conversations about grants and making those who traditionally have been last in line to be first in line, which I think goes along with Cardin's, what Cardin is trying to do, and more investment in minority owned businesses, of just minority women, all the things, and that's super important. Nikki says in chat, keep EIDL open as long as possible. This is the best thing for micro business clients. Yeah, with the low interest rate in the long term, sure. It's a good product. So I think they're going to be doing the EIDLs until the money runs out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and how much is, let's bring up, Melissa, if you could bring up the next slide, which has the numbers on it. We can just take a quick look at those numbers. EIDL, the number of loans approved. Oops, we have a little smaller column than we needed there. It's about 1.75 million loans approved. And if everybody remembers on this call, they got over 5 million applications. So I don't know, we don't know if those have been, the other ones have been denied or what have you, but and Mark, I don't know if you have any insight into that. And the EIDL, the total is 113 billion. California got about 17% of those loans, or 18% of the dollar volume, 18.6% of the dollar volume. And you can see the advances, 3.7 million for about, with California getting 15% of those. The advances amounted to 12.3 billion. California getting about 15%, not quite 15%. And then on the PPP side, the total loans, 4.7 million, with almost 12% coming to California, and the total dollars, 515 billion. And there's 610 billion, is that right? So there's 95 billion left, is that right, Liz?
That sounds right. I was gonna say, Heidi, you reminded me, the other thing on EIDL that has definitely been heard from industry, and also, all the many senators have echoed to SBA, was $150,000 cap. Like, we authorize up to 2 million, and that's what we meant, and that's what it should be. So that's another thing that was mentioned that both sides of the aisle really cared about in regard to EIDL.
Can you repeat that again? What do you say that again?
For initially, when SBA cut back and made EIDL only available to ag businesses, they then also put a cap on the money that you could get to 150,000, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to be up to 2 million mm-hmm. that you're supposed to be able to get, and that's something that they hounded the administrator on as well. She again said, well, they did the math, and if they, gave it to everyone, that would be enough. And again, with the, well, you could just ask us for more money, but Congress made it pretty clear, you know, we didn't intend for the idle limit for loans to be 150,000. We said
Right.
2.
Yeah. I mean, for our population, the businesses we work with, the 150,000 is like, that's a good amount, you know.
Well, good. And, you know, if they need
Yeah.
more, then hopefully that'll
Sure.
be available.
Sure. So I think does anybody have any questions on the numbers or the, you know, California is getting a little more than their share in the idle, about their share for PPP. Any other thoughts or questions? Let's stop sharing our screen now. And Mark, you said you were holding a question.
Well, yeah, going back to your numbers, I think that what we had seen is that the backlog, which was very SBA has been very opaque about status of things, and one of the complaints has been that the backlog of loans, how long it's taking, the change that was done from 10,000 to 1,000, and a lot of the borrowers who I've talked to, many of them have gotten you know, either turned down or some other kinds of communication from SBA that have been really difficult to follow up on. A lot of them have been getting things that reduce the amount of money that they expected, or that they were told that they needed additional information, but without telling them what that additional information might be. So there's a lot of real issue about folks kind of feeling as though they're not getting a clear understanding of where things are. So I guess getting back to Liz, to your point, a lot of borrowers are feeling that SBA is really not very transparent about where the status of EIDL is as far as where they stand. Oops, everybody's muted.
Yes. Liz, any insight into that? And there's also a question in the chat about is the EIDL capped or not? So first.
I was going to say, completely hear you. And again, it sounds like we need to put together, Heidi, some action around idle, its importance, things that we need to be changed, or need more of transparency. Again, not to harp back on the hearing, but that was another thing that was raised many times, was that no one can get an answer. You didn't know your status. And then now, like, thanks everyone that you're in the portal. But then, as you said, we've heard from multiple businesses saying, well, we didn't get the amount, or we were denied, or we got these funky communications, or we couldn't talk to anyone. So yeah, completely hear you on that one.
So more transparency, more not confusing communication. And so going back to the point where you and I had this question about the cap or not, is the idle capped at 150 or not?
So I think it was last week or the week before, when SBA reopened the portal, they still confirmed the cap will be at 150,000 for now, due to the appropriations. I think if or when they get more funds, then they'll lift it. But they said, you know, we have to keep it at this cap to even begin to service the amount of people that need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But to answer Vic's questions, the intention was up to 2 million, and then SBA just decided to cap it. It's not like Congress passed something capping it.
Mm-hmm.
But it still remains at 150, unless I missed some news today on that.
Okay, great. Other questions for Liz on any of the federal legislation? You know, I mean, I guess my question would be, there's not a lot of time left in Congress. You know, can you talk a little bit about the timeline and what's possible to do in that timeline? Because, you know, election season's right around the corner.
Yeah, so as it's also a really interesting kind of funky election season. I say that because everyone's virtual, and a lot of Hill staff are still virtual. Even when Congress has been out of session, they have been working around the clock. I mean, to this moment, staffers have been working, and the members have been working on the weekends, at night. So it's, we're used to during like when they're at home and campaigning, they're really focused on that. But because members are doing a lot of things virtually, like virtual Zoom fundraising calls, then they have a ton of time to also bother their staff about legislative action. So from when it comes to actually being able to get stuff passed, so things on the docket right now, the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, is really the must-pass bill in Congress because it authorizes all the defense programs, and no one wants to not authorize defense programs. So oftentimes that's where a lot of things get tacked on. We certainly have put things that are pertinent to anything defense. We'll throw small business provisions in there. There doesn't seem to be enough of a justification or consensus yet to put any of what we just discussed in that bill that's moving as a vehicle to get it passed into law. So I don't think that's an option. Appropriations is happening right now for the next fiscal year. Those will probably not be done by the beginning of the next fiscal year. They'll probably be done in December, but that chews up significant time. But you could see some things like if there was more idle funding, you could tack something like that onto the appropriations bill that funds SBA, which is Financial Services and General Government. So that could be a vehicle to move things. But I would say though, when it comes to CARES for everything, or even CARES for in the sense of just the small business provisions that everyone can agree on, staffers have told us they probably won't be able to get to that until after the July recess. But all of the members are feeling pressure, especially in election year though, to do things to benefit small businesses. So not to sound cynical, that's a good talking point, but also small businesses still need assistance, right? So they're very motivated on both the House and the Senate to pass something else. Because the House passed the HEROES Act that had some small business stuff in it, and that just didn't go anywhere in the Senate. There's no companion bill. So right now the committees are trying to work out a relief, recovery, whatever you want to call it, small business kind of next package. So we think we'll see something that's just small business specific move in July, or they want to do it before August recess, because once you start getting into September, October, then it really cuts into when they're at home for elections. So they're saying July, they being the committees.
Yeah. And one more, so on that, one more question is and maybe this doesn't come until, like you say, December or, later on, but the SSBCI money, the SSBCI is a state small business credit initiative, for those of you who don't know, and that was something that they did in the Great Recession. Is there talk about reviving that type of legislation and or money to the states for relief? I guess for relief or recovery. I guess maybe we're not at that stage yet.
Yeah, the money to state and local governments was another thing that had bipartisan support, especially after a bunch of the governors are still really pressuring Congress saying, we need these funds. The House Small Business Committee Chair, Nydia Velázquez, who's a Democrat from New York, she has been, and her team, really hot on what can we pull from things that happened in the Great Recession that were helpful. Like Heidi just mentioned, what can we then put into a larger small business relief kind of bill package, whatever it's going to look like. So the House in particular is really focused on that, Heidi, but I'm not sure if they, and I have to check if they're specifically looking at that program that you discussed.
Yeah, I haven't heard, I haven't heard. I mean, we heard a little bit about it, month and a half ago, but haven't heard anything.
Well, Anne is currently on the call with the House Small Business Committee, which is why I'm here. So yeah, we'll keep you all posted. She's kind of getting what's going on with them there.
Excellent, excellent.
Heidi?
Yeah, Mark.
Maybe another question to Liz. Because of the timing of the run out of the PUA money, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, which to a lot of Cameo organizations that have sole proprietors have been able to take advantage of that they otherwise wouldn't. And that runs out, I believe, at the end of July. And since that also sort of corresponds to the end when Congress runs into the August recess, what's your sense of whether that would be extended?
Are you talking about the additional $600?
It's really allowing sole proprietors that or independent contractors to be able to take advantage of basically unemployment insurance. Yes.
I know that the Treasury Secretary had mentioned that that was something the administration was kicking around, but I have to look into that and see if there's anything more specific on that, Mark, and get back to you.
Okay, because I think a good number of the Cameo organizations that really work with independent small business persons that are really without employees, and they, as sole proprietors, they otherwise wouldn't be able to take advantage of unemployment. Unemployment. So this allows them to do this for the first time, but that will run out. And once it runs out, then they will be unable to take advantage of that. If Congress goes out in the August recess, then I'm sure it's also for for those who are unemployment, that's another issue too.
Yeah, and that gets kind of to the heart of when I was saying, sometime in July, we'll probably see a lot of action around this because they understand. We weren't quite sure, but they made it very clear that they understood, all of these things have sustained businesses up to this point, and then a bunch are going to drop off. There's going to be a ton of unemployment if you don't make fixes or add more or keep adding to what's working, kind of ASAP. So that timeliness, is completely understood. So I mean, again, this is not a definite, but I would say that in July, since you said that's when a lot of the things end that were initially put into place, I think that's when you'll start to see those renewal of programs, if it's going to happen.
Yeah,
Sure.
There's two pieces to that. Just to be clear, there's the piece that allows the self-employed to collect unemployment insurance, which is called the pandemic, and then there's the extra $600, which everybody's getting until the end of July. I think it's July 26th or something like that. And to that end, I do want to mention something that Cameo has been doing, and it's open to the state. We'll make sure we send out a link to everyone to share with people. And we also have a toolkit. We have partnered with Legal Aid at Work, which is based in San Francisco, to offer assistance to self-employed people to help them apply for the pandemic unemployment assistance. So if you can get the word out, we would love for you to help us do that. And it's really easy. You can copy paste emails, you can copy paste social media posts and things like that. And Melissa just posted to me privately. So she'll post it to everyone. I think that was, yep, there you go, Melissa. You can download it and just copy paste and if you do send an email out, please do let us know. Just send me an email, say, hey, I included it in our newsletter. Great program. It can help people get their unemployment insurance. Somebody will walk them through. We also have language specific. I know Tagalog, Mandarin, Spanish, and I can't remember what else, but there's several languages that they're able to do it in. So if you work with populations that are not English speaking, go ahead and have them call in. There's a phone number. They can leave a message in their language and somebody will pick it up. So great. Any more questions for Liz on the federal stuff? And then we'll move to a brief overview of what's happening in the state. Is there any questions?
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Mark, as well. That I think we have some really solid things that we can bring to Congress's attention because the time really is now to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and thank Ann for all you guys are doing there. I know you're working hard, and if the staff's working around the clock, I'm sure you guys are too. So thanks, and yeah. So let's move on to state stuff. Melissa, if you could just bring up our last slide, and then I have a couple of bullet points that are not on the slide. There is a state budget as of this week. In it, it's called what they're calling a junior budget that's going to happen in August. And basically what they've put off all the economic stimulus until then. They're waiting to see what California's tax returns are going to look like come mid-July. So once all that is worked out and they have some numbers, then they'll start talking about what they're going to do for the state. And something that Cameo is really interested in is, access to some kind of capital, whether it be in grant or very low, no cost fund for our member CDFIs to lend out, as well as for our small businesses. What was in the budget, which is really exciting to see, is for the third year, it's fully fund the small business assistance centers, the federal recognized ones, so that's like the women's business centers, the PTACs, the procurement technical assistance centers, the small business development centers, as well as the capital infusion program, which is the SBDCs use to get money out the door. So that's been funded for another third year. I know there's a couple of people on the line that are involved in those organizations, and they've been doing a great job of collecting their data, proving their point. And we did write a blog post on it on our blog about how important they are and how much increase in demand they've seen since the COVID outbreak. There's also another $50 million to the iBank for the state loan guarantee program. So now there is and I have an update on that. There is $50 million in the state loan disaster guarantee program that the governor put in there in April. The kicker to that was they were supposed to only guarantee loans that couldn't be for business owners who couldn't get funding elsewhere. So what happens is a lender will go and make a loan, and then it is guaranteed by the state of up to 95%, and that allows that lender to do possibly more riskier loans. So one of the caveats to that was that you couldn't have a PPP or an EIDL loan, and that while and that means even someone who got an advance, like $1,000, one of these, or $2,000 for an employee. And we know that, we've heard many examples from our members that money wasn't enough, where they might have gotten, the PPP might have been for 2.5 months, but then, now they've still got another 2.5 months that they need to get over the next hump, and they can't go and get a loan for that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we're working with that was not a requirement in statute. So that was something that the GoBiz and the iBank put on. So we're hoping that that's able to be modified, and that that restriction will be lifted. So stay tuned for that. This other $50 million that's in the budget is going to the state loan guarantee program. I'm still waiting to see the language to see if what kind of stipulations and what the guarantee looks like on that, if it's just going into their loan guarantee program. Bye, Elizabeth, thank you. And so waiting to see the language, it's not all out yet. And the other thing that was in the budget is waive the $800 minimum franchise tax fee for new small and medium-sized businesses. And that is something that Cameo is supportive of. We probably might have put a few more restrictions on it than is otherwise available. I think we might have targeted to low mod income, but it is good for our people who want to start a new business and want that coverage of an LLC. The other piece that Cameo is working on is the Department of Business Oversight's expansion to the Department of Financial and Protection and Innovation. And I think we've all come to a consensus, those of us who are working on it, that that's a terrible acronym because it just does not roll off the tongue. It's kind of like CDBG. Yes, you have to, right? You have to think about it. Anyway, so that is what they call deferred without prejudice, and meaning it's not in the budget, but it's not exactly in the budget. And the sticking points around that were that the Department of Business Oversight would be given CFPB power, but the legislature didn't have enough oversight on what the DBO was gonna do. And so now we do think that many of those things have been worked out. And so that's really good. And the reason why we're excited about it is because it would give the Department of Business Oversight enforcement powers and oversight issues over lending activities. And lending activities that include even for those businesses or lenders or alternative lenders or whatever who are not licensed by the DBO currently. So all our lenders are licensed by the DBO, so come under the oversight. So it doesn't affect our lenders. What it affects is those lenders that we're trying to stand up against with SB 1235 and the responsible business lending stuff that we passed a couple of years ago. So this would be the enforcement arm to that, and ideally be able to capture and stop predatory lending in small business from companies that are offering up to triple-digit interest rates to the clients that be. And I think if there's anybody who wants to talk about this, I'm happy to go on and on and on about it. So this is something that Cameo, is continuing to work on. I was on a call this morning with the cool thing about this is that it's giving us a bridge to work with the consumers on, because the consumers really want this because of all the predatory practice in consumer lending. And so we're forming some more allies, which is really nice. There's a couple other things I didn't put on the slide. There's two bills that Cameo's looking at. One is SB 1157, which would talk about require landlords to report good rent reporting, to use rent reporting, and it doesn't apply to smaller landlords, and there's some restrictions around it. So we felt comfortable on supporting it. We think that would be a really good thing for to help build credit, especially for a lot of the small disadvantaged businesses who may not be homeowners. So that's a good thing. A lot of times those small business owners do use their personal credit in the process. And then the other one is public banks. There's a public banking bill that we're taking a look at, which would basically take some state deposits and put it into a public bank so they could lend it to, the idea would be so they could lend it to CDFIs and do community development work. I will have more information on that at a later date. We're still kind of teasing it out and haven't seen the exact language. So that comes out, I think, it's coming out if it's not out today, it's out early next week, is what I heard. So, and that is AB 310. So those are 2 more pieces. So that was a mouthful. Does anybody have any questions on that? And Melissa, you can, if you don't mind, stop sharing. Thank you. Any questions on that for anyone? Great. Well, if there are none, the floor is open. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear whether or not these, you know, the programs that are being proposed are working. Are anybody having any luck with or seeing other problems with PPP or EIDL that we can bring to the attention? I do have a call if anybody is on here from Sacramento or is working with any Sacramento businesses. I'm not sure that there are, but if anybody is, I do have a media call looking for small business owners who are affected by predatory loans. So if anybody has one of those, that would be great to pass on to me. I think everybody's ready. Everybody's ready for the weekend. I don't blame you. It's summertime. Going once, going twice. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, then everybody gets everybody gets a few minutes back to their Friday so they can get off work 7 minutes early. And just one comment is the programs seem to be working. The turnaround time has increased. That's really great. I think the, you know, some of that might be dependent on location and the bank, but great. Well, if no one has any other questions or comments, I am going to wish you all a very lovely weekend and a happy, safe 4th of July. It is, we'll have another listening session in a couple of weeks to get us all up to speed. If there's something new, if there's not, we might hold it for the following week. But you know, with this news cycle, who knows? Have a great weekend and keep on doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much.